It's funny because pro-Israel people like to call me anti-Semitic, but that's
Of course.
by the by. My record goes back, over a decade ago. I wrote a piece about anti-Semitism in the Muslim community. I've been a staunch opponent of what you might call traditional anti-Semitism, which is on the rise. Have you had comedy clubs saying they don't want to work with you since October 7th?
Not me directly. There's certainly, I've been vocal in a way where there was a comedy club I was no longer interested in working in either.
Bassem Youssef, who's often a co-host on this show, made
Yes.
the point very recently with me on this show that he moved from Egypt to the US because he couldn't criticize his own government in Egypt. He gets to the US and he discovers he can't criticize a foreign government in the US, which is a bizarre state of affairs.
Mehdi Mic Drop Hasan and Gianmarco, who's half Italian and half Jewish, are about to bulldoze the political fences around free speech debates and expose the barbed wire underneath. One's a razor-tongued journalist who's allergic to hypocrisy. The other, a touring comic who weaponizes punchlines against censorship. Together they're coming for the sacred cows of both right and left. They're torching the mega crowd that hands out free speech champion trophies while locking up grad students for tweeting Free Palestine. They're side-eyeing liberal executives who march for every cause until Israel enters the chat, and suddenly the mute button gets slammed like a studio door. And yes, they'll laugh while doing it because nothing rattles fragile power like a joke that lands harder than a safina. So sit back, hide the PR talking points, and get ready. This convo isn't just another pundit pillow fight. It's a high voltage roast of double standards where no facade or fragile ego survives unscorched. Let's roll.
I talk about the things that I feel like I have the right to talk about. And so I saw Jewish friends, American Jewish friends, suddenly claim anti-Semitism in this new way that was very clearly hypocritical in my view. So even the jokes that I make, they're really about the thing that I know, which is the American Jews using anti-Semitism as a undefeatable argument against any critique of a country that they're not even a citizen of. And that's the hypocrisy that I felt like, because I was so close, I could see it so within me, that I found an angle on, a comedic angle, but one that rang true to my own views.
And do you feel that your Jewishness allows you to address that topic in a way that if I did it on stage, it would just be, well, you're an anti-Semite talking about anti-Semitism?
100%. I think I live in the world that all other comedians live in, where especially when things are put online outside the club, where you can get in trouble if people feel that you're overstepping your bounds, sometimes rightfully so, sometimes over-exaggerated. But I think in the realm of talking about Judaism, I feel a degree of go ahead, accuse me of anti-Semitism. I know other people are being silenced because of the strength of that accusation. You can't do it to another Jew. And I've gotten emails.
Not for a lack of trying.
Not for lack of trying. People have written me, they say, you're pretending to be Jewish. You're putting this upon you so you can make your jokes. And when I go down the street and the Hasidic Jews go, are you Jewish? They're putting it on me. I was circumcised. I have been told I am a Jew. That's part of the whole thing. They said, because my mom is Jewish, I am Jewish. So you don't just get to take away all that years and logic just because it serves your political interest in this one moment.
And a political thing, that's what's so interesting. It's not a religious test that they're imposing on you.
Yes.
It's about a foreign state, as you say, which is fascinating. It is a very emotive issue. It is a very divisive issue in Jewish communities. There's a bit of a generational gap. A lot of younger Jewish folks are more critical of Israel. A lot of older Jewish folks are still very loyal and defensive. Do you have to be careful around, I don't know, extended family? I know you've mentioned your grandfather on stage, like when you make these gags.
Yeah, no, I kind of argue with my mom sometimes about it, just because, the way the news presents all these things, if you're getting your intake from mainstream media, you're just not getting a three-dimensional picture of people suffering. And I mean, Twitter, for its a gazillion shortcomings, one thing you do get on an app that doesn't censor is you see some brutal images and videos of Palestinians suffer in a way that you can't deny, in a way that they would never show on MSNBC in the morning, that my mom wouldn't see. So we argue about me trying to be like, you need to look at this. You need to understand the full picture. So we certainly have arguments. And I think when it comes to showbiz stuff, I'm lucky because I'm a touring comedian. My base is, do people buy tickets to see me? That's my power. But beginning, middle, end. I'm not reliant on a producer. If one comedy club doesn't want to work me, there's many others that will.
Have you had comedy clubs saying they don't want to work with you since October 7th?
Not me directly. There's certainly, like, I've been vocal in a way where there was a comedy club I was no longer interested working in either. But I've had friends, certainly, that it's, again, whenever you deal with the arts, it can always be tough because did you not work at the comedy club because they didn't want to book you anymore because you were bombing, or is it because of your views? It's always muddled. It's like when people say they're shadow banned online and you're like, is it that or
Nobody wants to follow you.
And there's always that. But there are some clubs, certainly one in particular in New York, where like the owner was literally writing another comedy club saying you shouldn't be booking this one comedian, a friend of mine who was posting pro-Palestinian things online. And so, of course, it exists. There are a lot of Jewish people in show business, which I feel like is, again, another thing that if you're not Jewish, gets taken as anti-Semitic, as if you're contributing to the conspiracy that the Jews run show business, as opposed to the reality that there are a lot of Jews in show business. And whether it be common, and of course, there's reasons for that. There's a long history of Jews being relegated to the performing arts, which were seen as like a lower class thing, and the Follies to the Hollywood Network to comedy clubs.
And a lot of these people in showbiz, especially in Hollywood, are super liberal on most issues.
On most
That's
issues.
what's so fascinating.
On most issues, and I think
except this one,
and that was also kind of the conundrum of Jews who, you know, maybe I did a Black Lives Matter march with in 2020, suddenly being resolute that any military action by Israel was 100% on the up and up, and it should not be questioned at all, and the hypocrisy was just so apparent. And I think within show business, you know, again, the conspiracy is the idea that the Jews run Hollywood, as in like there is a network, there is an overall plan. But what did happen is there were a lot of Jewish people in positions of power, and a lot of them felt very singularly when it came to Israel being correct and shouldn't be criticized. And so suddenly they acted in ways that they were affecting and making business decisions based on someone else's political views. And that's when I go, you guys, my Jewish brothers and sisters, you are contributing and actually in this moment creating a system of Jewish interests running Hollywood in these pockets. And you should be ashamed for living up to that conspiracy in this moment. And who's going to be able to call it out? Who can? But another Jewish person. You know, and that's where I see my role. That's where I see my strength, my freedom to speak freely, and my ability to have a unique angle that I can hopefully come up with a joke with.
And you've certainly done that. Look, I'm someone who's been concerned about anti-Semitism for a while. It's funny because pro-Israel people like to call me anti-Semitic, but that's
of course.
By the by. My record goes back, you know, over a decade ago. I wrote a piece about anti-Semitism in the Muslim community. I've been a staunch opponent of what you might call traditional anti-Semitism, which is on the rise. Basically, right-wing people demonizing a minority group, attacking them. We saw it in the first Trump term, synagogues attacked.
Of course.
You mentioned Twitter. It's funny that Twitter is that double-edged sword where you can get lots of information. But Musk has also amplified old school anti-Semites. You know, he himself has endorsed conspiracy theories about Jews.
Honestly, I think they struggle. I see a lot with a lot of like the edgy comedy, like the kill Tonys of it all. Sometimes when Israel comes up, they know in their mind, in the edgy world, that like being pro-Palestine is woke. So they don't go that direction. But on the other side of it, they love making anti-Semitic jokes. And so they're really stuck with
so
they
true.
do not have, this is one of the political conversations they do not have a point of view on. And honestly, they would never be pro-Israel because they want to make jokes about Jews. And they wouldn't be pro-Palestine because that is woke. And
But what you said is so fascinating about the kind of anti-Semitic tropes about Hollywood. And it goes beyond Hollywood, right? It goes to the government. It goes to Wall Street. These tropes exist everywhere, right? The Jews run the banks.
Sure.
The Jews run the cinemas. The Jews own Congress. These are all anti-Semitic tropes.
Of course.
My worry as someone who has studied anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic tropes, and seen the return of old school anti-Semitism, not the new anti-Semitism, which is criticizing Israel, but the old school stuff, which is the Jews are too powerful, is when you have instances whereby people are silenced in the name of defending Israel. That's only going to increase anti-Semitism because that's going to take every bigoted trope and say, well, it's true. See? They're going to point to every example of another public figure silencing criticism for Israel and saying, see? And
Of
it really
course.
worried. And I don't understand how so many people, I say this as a Muslim, my cousins in the Jewish community don't see how dangerous a road that is to go down.
It's short-sighted.
To fuel the right wing, by the way, the right wing people.
To fuel the right wing that will
when people
turn
say-
on them in a second.
Exactly. When
Yeah.
people say, oh, the left is anti-Semitic, I'm like, can you point to me a leftist who has walked into a synagogue and gunned down Jews? I don't know of any. But I do know under Trump, two right-wingers echoing Trumpian rhetoric walked into synagogues and gunned down Jews, right? So for me, that is a very real, and the same people, by the way, the same people who gun down Jews, gun down Muslims. We know that evidence shows that anti-Semitism and Islamophobia tends to exist in the same person.
Of course.
So for me, I'm looking at this thinking, this is really bad. Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel are actually screwing over American Jews in many ways.
Of course, I think, and it's got to be a conundrum. I think as a Jewish person, it's to be a conundrum where, of course, there are anti-Semitic people who love the idea of a place where all the Jews should go live.
Yeah.
Like that is in line with a certain kind of thinking. And I think that's
Some of the earliest supporters of Zionism held that view.
Of course.
Get them out of Europe.
And so I think it's a short-sighted thing where again, I didn't have this kind of indoctrination in childhood of just thinking that, maybe when everything goes to shit, this one place is going to be safe. So they prioritize Israel above all other views. But they're cozying up with people who are anti-Semites, who do not like the Jews, who will turn on the Jews, all in the name of a country they're not even citizens of.
You've also got conservative Christians who like Israel because they think that once all the Jews are in one place and dead, then Jesus will come back, which I've always found a fascinating alliance.
I remember that one clip of like Mitt Romney talking about what he thinks will happen eventually, and you're like, oh, okay, this is.
By the way, with your Italian name, do people ever say anti-Semitic things to you about Jews, not realizing that you're Jewish?
I think I give off enough Jew that they can tell. I mean, there's not. I cannot pass a Hasidic guy, whether they're 12 or whether they're 80, and they go, "Are you Jewish? Are you Jewish?" So they can tell. They can see it.
You mentioned the kind of crackdowns for a foreign country. Bassem Youssef, who's often a co-host on this show, made the point very recently with me on this show that he moved from Egypt to the US because he couldn't criticize his own government in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
He gets to the US and he discovers he can't criticize a foreign government in the US, which is a bizarre state of affairs. Like Harvard just adopted the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, where many of the examples of anti-Semitism, I think 7 out of 11, relate to criticism of Israel. And there's this ironic position now wherein, for example, in Harvard, you can say America was born out of racism, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
If you say Israel was born out of racism, that's one of the anti-Semitic definitions. So we're in this bizarre world now where free speech is under threat because Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government and their supporters in the US have pushed these definitions. And I just wonder, when you look at, for example, the situation with Mahmoud Khalil, I know you're based in New York, what happened to this Columbia grad student whose wife recently gave birth? He asked, could he be let out from Louisiana for a couple of weeks to go be with his wife? And I said no. He's being held, a permanent resident, husband of American citizen who just had an American child, because of his speech, his views. They've got nothing else on him. We've seen no evidence of terrorism, support for Hamas, just because he's pro-Palestinian.
And from the party that was so virulent about free speech, I just think conservatives are very good at kind of hammering home a big concept like free speech and hiding the asterisk that they introduce when they're in power, whether freedom, but all sorts of things. The thing is, they use language. So obviously, what do they go? They go, well, free speech, but you were supporting a terrorist group. And then if you go further into what do you mean supporting a terrorist group, and it's like a pamphlet that said like, please stop killing some innocent people. And so I just think the American population is so not trained to see past what seems to me like a very first level layer of bullshit easily. So all you have to do is free speech, but you're supporting a terrorist group. And they don't go, well, what does that mean? What do you mean? How can that definition of supporting a terrorist group mean whatever you want it to?
Isn't it because they never really believed in free speech? It was always about free speech for us, for people I agree with. They don't actually believe in the concept of free speech.
Of course, but that's why all those people who kept claiming it, I think they have to be just skewered constantly. Yes. Because it was not that long ago. Yeah. It was so recent that all we were talking about was free speech and be allowed to say it. And it's like, okay, if you really wanted to say this slur, then at least you got to join it with this. If you really want to believe in free speech, hammer it home, or you just have to humiliate them, say you do not believe in free speech. And that needs to be the moniker for Trump, for any of the people supporting these
it's not even
policies.
old, right? They're currently, while cracking down on free speech, are continuing to say we're the party of free speech. Trump administration is giving out awards for free speech champions while they crack down on Mahmoud Khalil and multiple other people for their speech. You mentioned bullshit. I mean, Donald Trump is the master of bullshit in our era.
Free speech only matters if it protects the voices you dislike, and Mehdi points out the hard proof it doesn't. A Columbia grad student is still sitting in detention for nothing more than a pro-Palestinian post, while his wife gave birth. Gianmarco backs him up on the comedy circuit, showing how club owners and Hollywood execs blacklist performers who dare question Israel while pretending they're progressive on every other issue, both highlighting a bigger pattern. Conservatives who preach First Amendment absolutism until a Palestinian flag emoji shows up. Liberals who march for Black Lives Matter but fall silent or shout antisemitism when Palestinians demand the same dignity. Tech Mongols who promise open platforms yet throttle reach or flag accounts the moment Israeli policies is criticized. And universities that let students call America genocidal but brand identical language about Israel as hate speech under the IHRA definition. Add in the right-wing politician who posed for synagogue photo ops while retweeting conspiracies about globalist elites, and the hypocrisy is nailed from every angle. If you're done with the selective outrage, hit the subscribe button, share this video, and sound off below. Which self-styled free speech warrior do you think will be the first to blink when the real dissent tests their principles? Catch y'all on the next one.